The high school drama teacher over here accuses others of liking the sounds of their own voices.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I was a high school teacher before getting into politics, and I'm having a little trouble remembering what exactly the job that the Leader of the Opposition had before getting into politics.
Yes, and he left right in the middle of the semester, and I'm having trouble remembering why.
The small fringe minority who are holding unacceptable views do not represent the views of Canadians who beds are filled with people who chose not to get vaccinated. The risk posed to all of us by unvaccinated people. It's never too late to do the right thing. We'll be immensely pleased to be able to give you that first dose of vaccine.
I'd like to welcome the fake news media,
and the ideology in order to push particular agendas, and I think some of those agendas, unfortunately, pretty hardcore, pretty extreme. The power of misinformation, because so much, of what we hear coming from these protesters, from a scientific perspective, just isn't true. And
can you state categorically? You are fake news,
sir. Hello and welcome, everybody. Happy Friday. It is July 7th, and boy, do we got a good one for you tonight. Tonight is a bit of a different episode, depending on if you've viewed some of our content in the past or not. However, we're not going to be analyzing a specific news story as such. We're going to be analyzing language, and it's often language used in mainstream reporting as well as other propaganda tools. And the idea is to kind of show you that there's always been false idols since we'll start with Rome and we'll go from there. There's always been false idols put in place to be middlemen so that the elites can rule the plebs at an arm's length. There's a middleman right here. That's who the plebs have to direct their attention at, their frustration, so on and so forth. And meanwhile, the elites are the ones actually ruling, but they're doing it again from an arm's length. And this is very important because it's happening right now in modern times as well. And here we are playing the role of the pleb. Knowledge is power. Get educated to get liberated. There's many ways to look at it, but until you have an honest look at history, how it unfolded, what occurred, and what's happening now, you're going to be trapped in a very specific cycle that isn't helpful. A cycle that involves voting, watching any sort of news, like alternative or not, you know what I mean? A cycle that breaks you from the natural world. So knowledge is power and language is knowledge. And that has biblical roots as well as just historical roots in general. Language is power. Language is knowledge. And to control a language is to control the knowledge consumed by the people speaking, reading, and writing the language. Again, very important. So your first example of that, because again, we're going back to the Roman era. When Rome, quote unquote, fell and then did its sneaky small hat transition to the Vatican and incorporated, because again, Rome, as in the ruling government, was basically the first government to use incorporation, to use body corporates in their government. And it was at least no, they were. I'll say that they were the first, and if not, I'll correct myself down the line. And so when they transitioned and incorporated under the Vatican rather than Rome, they just went to a new Rome. The Bibles were printed in Latin. And this is very important because going forward, the Vatican was to maintain control of what knowledge the people had from the book they were supposed to be saying was God's book. Now, it's provable that the Vatican removed books from the Christian Old Testament, New Testament, whatever it wouldn't have been new at that point. It's very, very, it could have been the New Testament too. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, the Vatican has removed, I think it's 13 books in total. You've got the Book of Enoch, a lot of the Dead Sea Scrolls, this kind of stuff. There's been a lot removed from that Bible. But before we get to what was removed, what was kept in the Bible was written in Latin. And that's very important because the people of the day, the regular people, you and I, didn't speak, read, or write Latin. It wasn't necessarily specifically elite, but you were more upper class if you knew how to read and write and speak in Latin. And some people could speak it because it's easier to pick up a tongue verbally than it is without having any teaching to look at it. So the Bible is in Latin, which means what? Well, if you're still a man of God and you're still wanting to attend sermons and read from the Bible, you're now having to go to a state-sanctioned church and have a middleman, a priest, tell you what the Bible is saying. And think about how dangerous that is. Think about, in modern times, censorship and stuff like that. Being told in Canada with the News Act that just happened, the Online News Act, think about the control of information and the control of language. If there was a way for the government to only do their business in Latin from now on, think about how screwed the people would be. Do you know Latin? I've got a book that's first year Latin. I'm halfway through teaching myself first year Latin, quote unquote, a book that was written in the 1800s. I still would not be able to read or write most sentences in Latin. So that's what the Vatican did. They had all of their holy scriptures were written and published in Latin. So even if you had your own Bible that you could obtain, it was written in a language that you couldn't understand. There's always a middleman. So that's the main part of control, is to keep the elites and the plebs separated at arm's length. So there's never any dirty work on the part of the elites. It's all behind the scenes. Think about money. Money is too complicated, so you've got a banker, a middleman, and the finance guys that take care of the finances. You have to hire a financial advisor just to be able to have a retirement plan, because it's so contrived, that system, that most normal people don't even grasp it, and they don't teach it in schools. Why? Because they don't want you to be able to grasp it. They want you to need a middleman, a financial advisor, a debt consolidator, and all this nonsense. Similarly, with law, Edward, I think you understood what I was saying. I'll just toss that up here. I think you caught on to what I was saying. So money, too complicated. You get the financial guys, the advisors, yada, 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 stockbrokers, all this bullshit, because money is so complicated now because it doesn't exist. Money used to be a tangible currency, and at most points in our history, the currency, whatever it was, in whatever form, was backed by something tangible that actually existed and could be traded in for the net value of that note in that thing it was backed by, usually precious metals. Look at law. Look at how complicated law is. Imagine normal people, because people that watch this might not be normal people. They might be people that research a lot of this. But think about your parents, your brothers, your sisters, whatever. Think about having to represent or present yourself in a courtroom and defend yourself against allegations or something of that nature. Simply the forms that need to be filled out in certain orders and on certain dates, just the paperwork alone can be daunting, let alone the actual procedure once you're in court to apply for certain things, to avail of certain things, to say the right things at the right time. It's wholly contrived class of nonsense is what the entire bar is. But it's so complicated that you need someone who's been to school for 6 years post-secondary just to be able to navigate those waters. So you have to hire somebody to represent you. The moral of this story is that English is a contrived language. English takes all of its nonsense from Latin, and it's been given to us as a language to cast spells with, to spell words. So a lawyer now is needed to represent you. You can't present yourself. You have to be represented by an attorney who's a member of the bar. And the judge is a member of the bar, and the other lawyer is a member of the bar. It's a private society that they all three belong to. All sides in the courtroom, the your side, the opposing side, and the supposed neutral judge, all belong to a secret society with which you do not belong to. So you can show up and present yourself and navigate those waters on your own. And that is difficult. It's not easy. Or you can hire somebody to represent you and your interests, because you're not presenting yourself. So you're being represented. And either way, you're screwed, really, because it's a system that's not for you. It's a system of commerce. But many people don't understand what happens in a courtroom with bonds and the like. A courtroom is not a place for justice. It never has been. It was never set up that way. It's always been a system of commerce. It's only really in the last 200 years that we really started caring or noticing it to some degree. But it's always been about commerce. And if you want to present yourself and defend yourself against an allegation, you'll find it out very quickly. As rulings come in, you'll find out the monetary values attached to them and why. And again, language is power. And language in legalese is a completely different ballgame, because dog Latin, ironically enough, is what we refer to as legalese, which is English words. You look at them and you see them and they look English, they're spelt in English, and they have an English meaning. But when they're being used in a courtroom, they have a different understanding. They have the meaning from the Latin root words, which I believe was in the description here about Latin root words. If not, we'll get into that. Almost every English word is made up of 1, 2, or 3 root words from Latin. And those Latin root meanings is what the word is now means when being used in a courtroom. It sounds a little hard to grasp. So a quick example just to get you, and I'll say it because Edward Edwards put this comment in, right? And this doesn't mean you don't know what you're talking about, Edward. It's just you used the word understand, and that triggered something in my head. In common English, to understand is to comprehend. I understand what you're saying. I comprehend what you're saying. Those two are interchangeable. In a courtroom legalese, dog Latin, whatever you want to call it, understand means to stand under, means to grant jurisdiction to the person you're talking to. Similarly, assume. In common English, assume and presume are basically interchangeable. You make an assumption or a presumption, they're basically the same thing. However, legally speaking, an assumption, to assume, is to take on liability with whatever you're describing in your assuming or assumption. So in a courtroom, you need to presume, not assume. You need to comprehend, not understand. These are things that are, again, words matter, language is power. This is the, just checking in on Rumble here while we're here. Hello, Rumble viewers. I will be putting your comments up in a different fashion because I can't pop them up here on screen. Now, get more modern with it, because I'm talking a lot about Vatican history, stuff like that. Now, the money thing is very current, and current is all right, let's do that. current is a great word to use when you're talking about money, because in terms of language, money is water. That's what it is. And it's described and it behaves just like water because we're operating under maritime admiralty law. And we've got some really short, really interesting clips that you guys will like that's relevant to everything we're saying. So very quickly, and you could do a full episode on money alone, but money is water. Where money is kept where in a bank, water is kept where, generally speaking, riverbanks. And the whole idea is to control the flow of the water or the money. Assets, when you think of assets and how they behave, they're either liquid or they can be frozen. It's you could do an entire episode on just the money talk alone, right? Yeah, and you're getting it, Edward. Exactly, liquid, right? And your assets can be frozen as well. And currency flows. There's a flow of cash flow, right? It moves, it operates, it's described exactly as water behaves. So to get a little bit more modern with a couple of examples too, think about your public affairs. Your public affairs are so complicated that you need to hire a career politician who's either a lawyer, a doctor, or some well-respected career that we've thought up in our head. And you have to elect that person to have full and total control over all of your interests because it's so complicated. All the goings on of governance at the multiple levels, federal, state, provincial, municipal, and some are counties as well. It's incredibly complicated. So what do? You have a middleman, a politician. The politician is the middleman. Just like go right back to the Vatican, they had their middleman, the priest, who operates at arm's length from the elites and deals with the plebs. Just like with money, it's too complicated. The elites have their bankers and their financial advisors, and these guys, they do that. With law, it's too complicated. You have a middleman lawyer. Same deal. In public affairs, you have a middleman. It's the politician. And it's every politician, guys. Any politician that gets to a position of power has been approved. Nobody gets there without it. It is very easy to prevent somebody with good intentions, who's a regular Joe and just wants to save the country. It's incredibly easy to prevent that person from ever doing what they want to do. That it doesn't occur. Never. It never has. It didn't happen with JFK. It didn't happen with Trump. It's not going to happen with Maxime Bernier or Pierre Poilievre. It's never, ever going to happen from a politician. Break down the word. Do the root word thing with Latin again. Polytic. Poly, many, ticks are infectious parasites that create nothing but disease, like Lyme disease. That's what a politician is. So they're not there. They don't get to that position of obtaining power without being approved by those elites that operate at arm's length. Again, we as the people only see these politicians. They're the ones making the decisions. They're the ones affecting our lives. So we direct our anger where? At them. There's no elites. They're behind a curtain. It's the Wizard of Oz. They're behind a curtain that we don't know is there. Think about it with your health. When it comes to your health, just your personal health, something as simple as avoiding the flu or cold season is now so complicated that there needs to be a middleman. You need to have someone who went to med school for like 6 years and then, minored in this and majored in that just to be able to prescribe you pharmaceutical medication for different ailments and all this kind of stuff. There was once a time where many of our ailments, and I'm not saying that modern modern healthcare doesn't have a place in our world. I'm not saying that. But there was once a time when many of our ailments and many of our diseases, not disease, or many of our diseases were taken care of, remedied, or symptoms relieved through natural homeopathic remedies. Flu seasons and cold seasons were fought off with things that you have in your house right now. But health is so complicated. The human body is so complicated, and all this. Think about the pharmaceuticals. How could you ever prescribe those for yourself with all those big names? They're so complicated that you need a middleman. So you get your middleman. You get a doctor. He went to med school. He got told by the controllers what he's supposed to do, how he's supposed to respond to your certain ailments. And still are in my house. Yeah, Edward, exactly. A lot of people still have them in their house. Here we go. We'll get this one up on screen. Many people can grow things in their gardens that alleviate most of the everyday ailments that we occur, that get taken care of. Something as simple as heartburn. And I'm not giving medical advice. Okay, I'm giving you my own personal experience, and you do with it what you may. Something as simple as heartburn. I had this described to me by a chiropractor, out of all people. When I told him I suffered from heartburn a lot, he said, I guarantee you when you're suffering from heartburn, if you were to stand up and try to touch your toes, you wouldn't be able to do it. Normally you can, because I normally can. I play sports. I can touch my toes, right? And he knows that. But he said, I guarantee you at that time, if you find yourself lying down, sitting up, whatever, and you get that heartburn, try it. And I'm willing to bet you're less flexible at that time. And there's a kind of a flapper door, he describes it, in your spinal area, somewhere around your hips. And when that's supposed to open and close, and that allows for certain fluctuation of gas to regulate. And when you're seized up in certain areas, that flap won't open and close as it's supposed to, and that will cause your acid reflux. So you can either take a pharmaceutical, a Tums, whatever, and try to relieve the symptom, but that's not really fixing what the problem was. That's just taking the symptom away. Or you could try stretching that specific area out and see if in 10, 15 minutes that doesn't help. And that's been 3 years. I've never touched anything in the way of an acid reflux medication ever. I've simply done toe touch stretches for 15 to 20 minutes and my heartburn goes away. These are the kind of things that were never too complicated until people that have control of narratives made them complicated, just like they made law, your public affairs with politics, your money, your religion. Every aspect of your life has been made too complicated, and you, meanwhile, have been so dumbed down. And I'm not calling you dumb. I'm calling myself dumb as well. I say we as a society, as a people, have been dumbed down from the poisoning of our foods to the brain poison that gets fed to us on TV and movies and video games. Make no wonder we're even as well off as we are. So language is power, and controllers have always used language to manipulate or control narratives. And English derives from Latin. You hear a lot of words and you say, oh, that's a French word and this kind of stuff. Some of it is, yeah. But if you look hard enough, I promise you will find almost every word in English has a Latin root, either one or two or three Latin root words that make it up. Your best example, I'll tell you right now, and we're about to watch a couple of clips. They're 20-second clips, very informative stuff. And they're all videos that I took. So it's not somebody else's stuff. It's not photoshopped or whatever. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's have a look at a couple of clips. Here's your first one.
Do you think there is a reason that they chose to use pharmacy as the English word when it derives from the Greek word for poisoner? I don't.
So that was pharmaceuticals and pharmacy, and that comes from Greek, which again is it's basically like a brother language to Latin. I don't mean in that they're related or that they're similar. I mean in how they are used, because Greek comes in a lot with medicine as well, and I guess you figured out why. Um, Here's another. Oh, the example I was trying to say is government. Government is a Latin combination of two Latin words, gubernment. Gubern is govern, which is to control, and ment is mentality. So the word for government, which we think of as democratic and free and open and all this bullshit, is gubernmente, to control your mentality. Here's another clip.
People often don't believe me when I say this, but the word mortgage literally means death pledge in French. Read for yourself. How about that? More.
So that's a example that breaks down from French. But again, if you look deeper, the French connection goes back to the Latin roots. It's mortgage, guys. Think of it this way. And if you speak French, you'll get it. If not, you can look it up. Mortgage. Mort, M-O-R-T, means death or dead. And gage, G-A-G-E, is a plan or a presumption of something going to be done. So mortgage is a death plan. How long is a typical mortgage? 25 years, right? How long is a life sentence in jail? 25 years, exactly. A mortgage is a death plan. Here's another one.
It's pretty wild that. A pre-COVID definition of vaccine.
I just stopped that one and I'm going to put it right back up. I just want you guys to see that because I don't know how it's showing up on the screen for you for visibility. This is taken from a dictionary that was published in 1991, 1992. And every video starts with that to show you the timestamp just to give you an idea of what you're about to see. So here you go.
Isn't it also fun that included in the pre-COVID definition of virus? Thumbs up.
So the pre-COVID definition of virus, again, it's a non-living entity. It needs a host in order to stay alive. It cannot exit a body and remain alive. And that's what a virus always has been, always will be, except, of course, for when COVID came around, viruses operated differently.
It's pretty wild that. A pre-COVID definition of vaccine. Was a preparation introduced to the body to prevent disease. Doesn't sound like the booster regimen, does it?
So again, vaccines always have been the definition of them, and we can have a discussion on what they are. But what a vaccine has been purported to be has always been something that prevents what it's purporting to prevent. It doesn't reduce symptoms or any of that nonsense. But again, that was before COVID. So you have to take that into consideration. I think we're missing one of our clips, but we'll just go to this one here.
In case you're Canadian and thought the Bill of Rights was going to protect you. A bill is proposed legislation that's not yet enacted or made law. Pause and read for yourself.
That one's pretty simple. People like to talk about the Charter of Rights. We're going to get into that. Don't worry. But remember, words matter. So what is a bill? A bill is something that's proposed. It's not been enacted. Fair enough. Okay. How about this one?
Listen, all I'm saying is, learn about maritime law before you ever enter a courtroom.
Maritime admiralty law. We've already talked about money, the whole idea of money and justice being commerce done under the guise of water. Why is that? Because it's operating as admiralty law, maritime admiralty law, which is the law of commerce on the sea. It's very simple. Here we go. We're about to get into some charter stuff as well. But remember, we already looked at just what a bill is. What is a bill? It's proposed legislation. It's not enacted yet.
Why do you suppose that Black's Law Dictionary, one of the trusted and cited sources in Western law, defines bank in this way? What does a bank have to do with judges? Courtrooms? Unless our justice system is more of a commerce system. Look.
Again, guys, a bank is described as a courtroom, and a courtroom is described as a bank. A judge is described as a banker is described as a judge. This is in legalese, of course. Again, the words they use look and sound English, but the definition that they're using is of the Latin root. And it's very tricky. It's obviously something that shouldn't happen, but get educated to get liberated. Knowledge is power. However you want to look at it, we need to know this kind of stuff.
Isn't it fun that a legal definition of the word charter states a charter sets up a corporation and the corporation's structure through legislation? And then if you check the Securities Exchange Commission website and type in 000 to 30098 in the search bar, you can read the Corporation of Canada's public corporate filings. Because the SEC regulates international corporations. Interesting, isn't it? The Charter of Rights and Freedoms was corporate documents for Canada Inc. And we got tricked into thinking it was to protect us. You don't charter people unless you're putting them on a vessel.
So again, super sneaky, but a charter in legal speak, a charter is legislation to create a corporation and set up the structure therein. What did the charter do in Canada? It created the corporation. We were registered under the Securities and Exchange Commission, post-charter, and then it set up the corporate structure of the corporation. That's what the BNA Act was. It was all renamed to the Canada Act, and it was restructured, and roles were given out. The role of the chief executive officer is in Section 12. It's called an executive authority. So the CEO is the Governor General, appointed by whom and how much power and authority each position has, right down to going to the Securities and Exchange Commission website and read their corporate filings. Every corporation has to file financial documents each year. We think of our government doing budgets each year, but they're just proposing that to us as a budget in the public and then filing it privately with the Securities Exchange Commission as their corporate filings. That's all they do.
Isn't it fun that the word government is two Latin words combined? Govern equals control, manipulate, command. Ment equals mind or mentality. Coincidence?
All right, so I figure that was a good way to end off the discussion, to give you guys some ideas. If anyone's interested in seeing those videos sourced out for themselves so that they can see it in a more appropriate setting or whatever, comment I'll give you. It's just my TikTok channel that I just do, I don't do the dances or anything like that. I just post videos like that on TikTok. It's just another platform until I get kicked off of that one. So guys, takeaway from this is that English is a contrived language. English was created through manipulating mostly Latin, Greek, and then borrowing from other languages to make a language so contrived that you couldn't possibly understand the intricacies and nuances of all the complicated stuff the elites are doing. And those complicated things affect your everyday life and your future. They affected your past as well, but that can't be changed. Your future and your present is currently being affected by the people who are lying and manipulating you through the language that you speak. To combine letters in English to make up a word is called to spell. You're casting a spell. If you look at other languages, see how many other languages describe the combining of letters to make a word, and see if that word is the same word they have for casting a spell in magic, and see if you don't find yourself interested. At the very least, I would suggest looking up some other people who do this kind of stuff more in depthly if this stuff really interests you. I'm probably going to do another video or two more in depthly on it, but I'm never going to go as in depth as a lot of these other streamers do. So if it's a content that you enjoy, there's many people doing this. And again, if that's something you're interested in, comment and I can fire you off places you can look at. I do very much appreciate the comment section here, and especially on Rumble. You guys are great. I love you guys. We're still working on trying to post those up. StreamYard won't let us put Rumble comments up. I don't know why. I don't know what they have against Rumble, but either way, that's it for us tonight, guys. Thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in, whether you watched live and joined us in the comments or you're watching this as a rebroadcast. We do appreciate you. Thank you very much. It's July 7th, Friday, and you people, you stay sovereign, okay?